Hello and thank you for watching. This is SDSC, back again with LEGO Transformers G1 Barricade. In my last video, I mentioned that I would be limiting the amount of characters I would build from the G1 cartoon to just the big three from both factions. The key part of that statement was it only referred to characters who are actually from the cartoon. I'll still be making plenty of other G1 builds, just based off characters who only had toys but didn't show up in the cartoon, or who maybe didn't even actually exist when G1 was a thing. For example, like Barricade. Once I started planning out which characters I'd be interested in building in this G1 scale, Barricade was actually the first non-G1 name I put on my list. I just have a lot of love for this character. Obviously, he hasn't actually done that much in the franchise, but he's just so cool, and I knew I had to build my own version of him. So this was what I came up with. In alt mode, I tried to loosely base him off of a 70s classic Mustang. It's obviously not one-to-one, but I try to get some of the details there, and I think it works as an approximation. I wouldn't be confident in actually calling it a Mustang, so for those purposes, I would just label it a muscle car. But I did try to at least get some of the details. Specifically, I did go for the rounded headlights as opposed to the more squared off ones that Barricade had in the film. At this point, you've probably noticed something odd about this guy. He actually has a Decepticon insignia. Now that I've been building more characters that are actually big enough to have insignias added, I placed an order for some repro labels, and this was one of the first mocks I added stickers to. I think it's a really nice subtle detail to add on, and in the future I'd very much like to get some police stickers to add to the door as well. But for now, I think the Decepticon badge is a really nice touch. Taking a look at the front of the car, I've included Barricade's memorable ram bar, which actually can be swung down to reveal a pretty simple grille back there. You can also see I've added some smaller police lights down on the bumper. For a size comparison, here we have a minifigure. And here we have him with Jazz, who you can see I've also added a faction symbol to. I think these two cars look great together. That's all there is to say about car mode, so now it's time to transform. And here we have Barricade in his robot mode, where I think he looks really amazing. But before I get into it, I'd like to take a second to talk about the transformation. When designing this guy, I tried to keep his transformation relatively simple, which allows it to be a lot more quick and fun than most of my Transformers. It means there's a lot less finicky connections, and all around he's a really solid, durable figure. There definitely are the parts that are fragile. For example, these wings back here are just attached by one stud, and the cheese slopes on his feet do like to pop off from time to time, but all around, it's really solid. Obviously, it means he has a slightly less interesting transformation, but I think it's a fun trade-off to experiment with. With that out of the way, we can actually talk about the robot mode, and the first thing I want to mention is the colors. For the last night, they changed Barricade from black to dark blue, and while I generally think his design in that film was a downgrade, I do really like that color for him. I think it helps separate him from other police car Transformers, and in general, I just really like dark blue. But I had a bit of a problem. I don't really want to build the whole car out of that color, because it's a lot more limited than black, and I didn't want to have to worry about parts limitations. So instead, I made some of his robot mode only details dark blue, which also means that he has that trick that I really like, where the robot kind of changes colors as it transforms. I've also included some lavender details on the dark blue sections to reference the purple on his original movie toy, though that color might not show up very well on camera. Turning Barricade around, you can see that he pretty much has no kibble. He has a very efficient transformation, and the only kibble he has is the door wings, which of course are a part of his design. Taking a closer look at his head, you can see I've given him a gold face. A lot of toys of movie Barricade paint his face to be gold. Honestly, I don't really remember if that's accurate to the film, but it's a detail I've always remembered about Barricade toys, and I think it really popped here. Again, I also want to point out the lavender. I don't think it shows up very well on camera, but that is a very, very subtle shade of purple, and I think it looks pretty nice. An aspect of the design that I'm sure will be divisive is that I've given Barricade some pretty massive thunder thighs. Personally, I think it looks pretty sweet, but I know a lot of people will probably think it looks kind of dumb. I think it's kind of a decent approximation of the chicken legs he had in the movie, but while keeping them relatively G1. But again, if you think they look dumb, I don't think I'll be able to convince you otherwise. I mentioned earlier that the cheese slopes on his feet are a point of fragility, but I really enjoy how the light bars transform here, so I've decided to stick with this design. But just to show you, it is really easy to pop those off if you're not careful. For a size comparison, here we have a minifigure. And here we have Jazz, who he's about a head taller than. Personally, I really like this scale. I know that in the movie, Barricade is actually shorter than Bumblebee, and Bumblebee is about average for a car former's height. But that is obviously the movie continuity. And while I did draw a lot of inspiration from that design for this version of Barricade, I didn't want to go with that scale. Personally, I think it makes a lot more sense for him to be a bit taller than your average carbot, especially since he's a Decepticon, and Decepticons are usually a lot tougher and bigger than their Autobot counterparts. When it came time to build an accessory for Barricade, I was kind of stumped. I felt like every weapon he used in the movie just wouldn't fit this incarnation of the character, so I had to come up with something of my own, and this is what I came up with. It's a kind of Gatling gun, shotgun, rifle thing. I really don't know what it is, but it looks cool and it can simply stud into Barricade's hand. However, as you can probably tell from looking at it, that's not all it can do. It's actually a target master, so it's time to transform it. The first thing you want to do is just swing down the barrels like this, then open them up. Then swing down the barrels separately like that. And you can actually push them together, and that will cause them to spread ever so slightly. It is obviously stressing the clip a little, so it's an illegal connection, but I think it's worth it. Then you're going to bring down these droid arms. They will come out of the way, and you will spin this around, and here we have Barricade's little partner, Chrome. Initially, my plan was to make a Target Master inspired by Movie Frenzy, but as I was building it, it kind of naturally turned into a bird, and I really liked it. I think it's a lot cooler than it probably would have been if I tried to go for a humanoid, so I decided to stick with it, and the only holdover from when it was going to be a Frenzy is the fact that it's silver. I've decided to name it Chrome, as in a chrome crow, which I think is just perfectly stupid. For articulation, Chrome's head can look left and right. His wings can flap in and out as well as up and down. The legs are on a hinge, and he can flap his tail feather. In bird mode, Chrome can be clipped onto Barricade's wrist, or an extra piece can be added to mount him on his shoulder. For articulation, Barricade's head is on a ball joint, which allows for left and right rotation, as well as up and down, and some wiggle waggle. His neck is also on a joint, so it can allow for more range. But obviously, when in a neutral pose, it's best to keep that flush. At the shoulders, he has a ball joint which can go forward and backward, as well as outward, though it is pretty limited due to the design. They can pull out just a little bit to get a tiny bit of extra outward range, though again, it is pretty limited. Then at the elbow, he has a slightly greater than 90-degree bend, as well as a swivel, and then the wrist can hinge like this. In the hips, he has universal joints, which can kick forward and backwards, as well as in and out. Then at the knee, he has a ball joint, which can bend all the way back for transformation, as well as swivel, of course. Then at the ankle, there is a pivot. Barricade is a pretty cool character, but unfortunately Hasbro seems content to just make him a repaint of Prowl and call it a day. Personally, I think he deserves better than to be the evil redeco of Prowl, and I wanted to try and make a G1 or Evergreen design for him that still feels like the movie character, just redone in the G1 style. Personally, I think it was a massive success, and I hope all of you like him too. But for now, that's all I have to say, so I'll see you next time.